Sometimes our heart is screaming, I didn't want this to be a lesson. I wanted this to be love. Sometimes our heart is screaming, I didn't want this to be a lesson. I wanted this to be love. I wanted this to be the one. Like, why? Why is this happening again? Lessons learned. These are my weekly lessons learned. And when I heard that, y'all, it reminded me when I start negotiating the terms of my heart with someone who the relationship was completed with. So when I heard that, it reminded me of that because sometimes our heart is screaming, I didn't want this to be a lesson. I wanted this to be love. I wanted this person to be the one. And they're not, and that person is not the one. And loving them harder is not going to make them turn into the one. Making excuses for them is not going to make them turn into the one. Okay? It's okay to give people up. I'm not saying you're giving up on them, but you give them up because they're not the person for you. And the more you stay there and try to make it work, the more miserable you're going to be. Ask me how I know. Let's go on to the next lesson because that's a whole video. That's a whole message in itself. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to share my lesson with you for the week, last week, and then we're going to go and have an amazing day, amazing week. Lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, you're not behind. You're right where you're supposed to be. A lot of times, we may not say this, y'all, but we literally are comparing ourselves to people we see, things that we see. Or we get into these environments and these groups, because I've seen it, I've experienced this, and sometimes I used to think that too. And I said, you know what? Do what you can do. Maybe if you just now joining the group, start where they are, and then go back as you can. Versus looking at all the information that's already been there, because if you may have just got into the group, and the person has put out a lot of information, and then you got to go catch up, and that's okay. But start where you are. Maybe you didn't have the funds to get into the group the day it started. Maybe you didn't even know about it the day it started. We got to give ourselves some grace and ease. Because a lot of times we beating ourselves up about where we should be, what we should have. And here's the truth. You are where you're supposed to be. Embrace that. And act accordingly to that. All right. Next lesson. Slow and steady can still win the race. Don't count yourself out. Because you ain't going faster than them, because you're not ahead where they are, because you ain't doing it how they doing it. It's not popping off the way it's not popping off for you the way it's popping off for them. Here's what I know. Slow and steady still wins the race. Okay? That's lesson number 3. Lesson number 4. Oh, this was such a good lesson. Sometimes we go through life with the blinders on, trying to play it safe and comfortable. It's time to take the blinders off and stop playing it safe. Take a chance. It's either going to work or it's going to work. I was going to say not going to work. It's either going to work or it's going to work. Sometimes in life, we go through life with the blinders on. Oh, no, can't do that. I don't want to do that. That's uncomfortable. Oh, that's scary. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm not tech savvy. It don't work for me like it worked for them. Sometimes we go through life with the blinders on. It is time to take the blinders off and take a chance. It's either going to work or it's going to work. Okay. Last but not least, and this was the phrase of the day. Y'all might hear this stuff again. I'm just going to tell you right now because it's so good to me. And I think people need to hear it. Okay, the last lesson. We're not always the best version of ourselves. Especially when we are experiencing difficult times. And here's the thing. We don't walk around with our issues on our forehead. Experiencing grief, experiencing job loss, experiencing heartbreak, experiencing frustration, experiencing overwhelm. We don't walk around with that on our face. Okay, so nobody knows what each person is going through unless they tell you. And they may not even tell you. So we're not always the best version of ourselves, especially in difficult times. There are people, a lot of people, a lot of us, including myself, are having a difficult time. And we're not always the best version of ourselves. We don't always, we may look like we got it. And here's the thing about the things that we go through, just like I said about the stuff all written on your face, it's not written on our face. So therefore, we don't go through life looking like what we're going through. We don't go through life. I'm glad I don't look like what I'm going through. So you can look at a person, oh, they're so dressed up and they look like this and they look like that. But they just angry. They just frustrated. You don't know what that person is going through. We're not always the best version of ourselves, especially in difficult times. That's why we shouldn't take everything personally. We shouldn't take nothing personally because we don't know what somebody is going through, growing through, I like to say. Let me run back these lessons and I'm out of here. Sometimes our heart is screaming, I didn't want this to be a lesson. I wanted this to be love. Why isn't it love this time? Next one. You're not behind. You're right where you're supposed to be. Trust your process. Next, slow and steady still wins the race. That's a tongue tire. Slow and steady still wins the race. Don't count yourself out. Slow and steady still wins the race. Sometimes we go through life with the blinders on, playing it safe and comfortable. It's time to take the blinders off. It's time to stop playing it safe. Take a chance. It's either going to work or it's going to work. Last but not least, we're not always the best version of ourselves, especially at difficult times. Don't take everything personally because we don't know what another person is going through. All right. Let's be, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, give it to me, Holy Spirit. Let's be kind to one another because we don't know what somebody's going through. We just don't know. We have no clue because we don't look like what we're going through. I'm glad about that. Okay, that's all I got. I hope these lessons were helpful for you as they were helpful for me. I hope you have an amazing week, all right? And stay in peace and be kind to one another. You can't be kind, baby, be quiet. That's all. See you in the next video.